So Dark has come to a close with its third and final season. But I actually started watching this show about 3 weeks ago. It had been on my watch list since forever, but I started watching one episode a day at just the right point so I'd be ready for season 3 with the rest of the world. But serious props to the writers and people behind this show, because they had a complete and finished story to tell. They very obviously planned and mapped out this story since the very beginning. They knew they had 3 seasons of story worth to tell, and they told exactly that. They didn't try and stretch it out, and Dark has become one of the most popular Netflix originals out there, and it would have been so easy for the writers to say, you know what, we can make a couple more seasons of this, but they didn't, and that deserves serious props. It's something that I wish the Stranger Things writers would have listened to, because lately it feels like that show definitely is something that they're just winging. But first off, I just know that while I'll be trying to keep this relatively spoiler-free for Season 3, there's probably going to be stuff in here that'll spoil the first 2 seasons. So if you haven't seen those 2 yet, which you absolutely should, then maybe don't watch this video. But the season as a whole feels like it's split into 2 halves. The first 4 episodes are paced quite differently than the second 4, and the tone remains consistent throughout, but there's a sense that things get more serious, more dire, and that there's a sense of moving towards a really big endgame with episode 5. The first 4 are still great for sure, but they're very slow, and they definitely feel like they're a lot of setting the stage and putting pieces in the spots. Episodes 1 to 4 feel more like a penultimate season than an actual final season, but still they're needed to put the pieces in the spots that they need to be in. It kind of reminds me of Breaking Bad Season 5, in that season was split into 2 halves as well, both with 8 episodes, and they were both spread out by like half a year. The first 8 episodes actually put the characters where they need to be, and then the second 8 episodes were straight up insanity from beginning to end. And the 2 halves of Breaking Bad are so different that a lot of people just call them Season 5 and Season 6, even though it's all technically Season 5. But for that reason alone, I wouldn't have been completely surprised if they actually made Dark Season 3 and split it into 2 halves of a season and air them at different points in the year. Like Netflix are actually doing that with Lucifer Season 5. I think Part 1's airing in August and Part 2 doesn't have a release date yet. I'm very happy they didn't do that here, mainly because though the episodes are great, the first 4 are slow in a way that if it was all we got in one go, then I would be a little disappointed with it. Like, not like they're bad, they're so slow paced that the whole season is made better when you have the second half as well to latch onto. But like for example, going off the first 4 episodes, I was beginning to think that this would probably end up as my least favorite of the trilogy of seasons. But then episodes 5 to 8 really up the craziness and amazing storytelling to the point that I genuinely don't think I could rank the 3 seasons. Like, each season is so unique and different while also being 3 parts of the same story. They're so tied to each other that it's impossible to think of one without the other 3. Like, I genuinely think this show should be something writing classes look into in college or schools, because it does such a masterful job at tying together seasons and leaving practically no open ends. But that said, this also might be the most confusing and complicated show that I've ever watched. Like, if you've seen season 1 and 2, you know how confusing and complicated the show is. That doesn't change in season 3. If anything, it gets more confusing and complicated this season. But I've watched a bunch of shows like this, kind of like Legion and Westworld come to mind. But the thing that differentiates Dark from those is the fact that everything is connected in this. Everything ties together in this final season. This season completely changes what you know and what you remember from seasons 1 and 2, but it also still will make complete sense if you went back and rewatched 1 and 2. Like, something will happen in this season, and then you'll go back and rewatch season 1 and realize there were hints to that there the entire time, so obviously that had been planned from the very beginning. Like, this does all feel like it was created at the same point, that the writers had a vision and they said they wouldn't begin to make the show unless they had the entire season planned out from beginning to end. And that's what separates it from Legion and Westworld. Like, I still like Legion, but that show gets... Some of the stuff that happens in it, I feel like is definitely just there to be there. Like, it didn't make sense of what we'd seen towards the beginning of the show. Like, sure, I may have missed a lot with Dark. I know damn well I didn't understand a lot of the story. There were so many times during all 3 seasons that I was like, I actually don't know what's going on here. I don't know if I missed something or if I just didn't understand something correctly, but I definitely am lost in this season. Or I'm definitely lost in this scene. But I still really enjoyed it. And, like, yeah, sure, I didn't understand a lot of the story, but I know it still makes sense. I know that if I went back to the first 2 seasons, and if I mulled over all 3 seasons together multiple times, I'd eventually get it, and I'd eventually understand everything, and eventually be able to make the connections between everything. But with Westworld, even when I'm confused as hell, I'm never convinced it makes sense. I'm never convinced if I keep watching seasons 1 to 3 over and over again, that it'll make sense to me. Like, I'm never convinced that with Westworld, it's a story even the writers understand. I always get the feeling that the writers are making it up as they go along in that show and just adding confusion to be confusing. I think they even admitted with season 2 of Westworld that they added in a load of twists and turns that didn't make any sense just because they wanted to be one step ahead of all the people theorizing. And that's just plain stupid writing. But in all 3 seasons of Dark, I never got that feeling. I always felt like this was completely thought up and mapped out from beginning to end. There's some characters in this season that I really wish got more spotlight. For example, Agnes, this is definitely the least she's been in this season, I want to say. But I also don't hate that they didn't get a lot of spotlight, mainly because I can point to a character that I absolutely love this season and say, well, if this character got more spotlight than this character, I probably would have felt the same way, just reversed. But the ending is also interesting in that it completely ties up the story we know, but it also leaves no open ends. But even at that, it also ends in an ambiguous way. Like, it's hard to talk about, but while it closes open ends in certain places, it leaves the story still kind of ambiguous in a way that can keep people theorizing and guessing for years to come. But I've just been so impressed by this show that the show's only been legit a part of my life for about 3 weeks now, yet in those 3 weeks it has hands down left an impression on me that only my favourite shows have managed to do. And Dark Season 3 easily solidifies this entire show as up there with Daredevil for the absolute best of the best with Netflix originals. But if you've seen this season, what do you think about it? If you haven't, then please watch it, it's amazing. And what's your thoughts on the overall show? If you like this video, please like, share, subscribe and all that, and I hope you have an awesome day.